And what you're trying to do in any merger acquisition is you're trying to, basically the formula is 1 + 1 = 3. You're trying to become better and stronger. And oftentimes in these kinds of scenarios, organizations lose sight of the fact that reputation is built inside, and that you have to pay particular attention to your employees on both sides, the acquirer and the inquiree, and make sure that throughout the process they understand exactly what the value proposition is. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some of the missteps organizations tend to take. Is when organizations actually obviously come together, or at least try to, and they don't pay particular attention around what their reputation is. And again, the reputation is how they're basically projecting themselves to the outside world, and that has everything to do with how the internal world feels about the organization. Then what they do is they lose basically the whole value proposition for coming together in the first place. And so, their earnings could be affected, certainly revenue and sales, profit margins, but more importantly, customer service, brand ID, things of that nature. So going into it, they may be strong, but not paying attention to it, they may come out of all of that in a weakened state. Look, reputation is a multidimensional thing. The thing that you have to pay attention to, quite frankly, is do your own employees and the employees that you're going to be bringing on board, do they understand exactly what the future looks like or can look like by merging or having these two organizations come together in some way, shape, or form? And if you can focus on that and allow people to basically create the future, then you're basically not only protecting your reputation, you're protecting the ability to grow. And I think that's really the key aspect that you have to pay attention to. If you look at over the last 10 or 20 years, I think you'll see the time AOL merger did not work out. Obviously, AOL has subsequently been spun off. Similarly with Daimler Chrysler, both went into it feeling that it was a merger of equals when in fact it wasn't. They were actually acquisitions. And so people didn't realize that was in fact what the reality was. And so the value of in both of those transactions dissipated over time. I think there's been, if you look at what Pfizer and Wyeth have done in the States, I think has been certainly a successful merger. And I think acquisition, and I think the difference is that they went into it at the outset realizing what it in fact was. In the Daimler Chrysler case, in the Time Warner AOL case, I think they tried to position it as a merger. And I think in both cases, as I said, it was an acquisition. So the rhetoric didn't really match the reality of how it then happened. So people were left, particularly employees, were left with, well, I thought I was going to be part of this. And in fact, what you're doing is just putting your culture on mine, or having the fact of Daimler, having the Daimler culture try to dominate the Chrysler culture. And it didn't work. We saw what happened. I think if you look at the successful mergers and acquisitions, you'll find that the first question they ask themselves is it a merger or acquisition? And it may seem to be a very simple question, but it's a very profound question, because once you identify that in fact it is a merger, then you can basically identify what the rationale was for it. And then people have an expectation of what a merger is. If you say it's an acquisition, people have an expectation of what an acquisition is. In the latter, it's more of maybe I have a chance to help create the culture. In the former, you probably don't. It's probably we're going to actually be putting our policies, our practices onto your business. There may be some isolated areas where we might look at what you're doing and say, hey, that's something we should adopt. But for the most part, it's going to be our situation. Look, at communications, first of all, as you well know, is holistic. I will say that at different points in time, particularly in an M&A situation, you have to start with externally, because what you're trying to do in an M&A situation is you're trying to convince Wall Street, you're trying to convince the financial world that this in fact is a legitimate reason. There's a real business rationale for these two organizations to somehow come together, either through a merger or acquisition. I think once that happens, then you have to think about very specifically internal communications. You've got to think about culture, you've got to think about brand, you've got to think about reputation, you've got to think about image, you've got to think about productivity. You've got to think about talent retention. You don't want to have people leaving because in fact in an M&A you're buying the people. Yes, you may be buying a brand or a product or a set of customers or a market, but in the end you're buying people. And so internal communications becomes critical as you work from the transaction to the integration. And then I think, like you were saying earlier, then communications holistically, internally, externally, have to work in sync so that the reputation, in fact, is projected accordingly. You know, I think the biggest personal achievement for me over the past year probably has been in the area of recognizing the value of communications in new and different areas, particularly around risk management and things of that nature. You know, you get into this profession and you look at it in many ways in a very myopic fashion. And then as you kind of experience different things, you begin to open up and see that communications can really touch and impact so many different parts of the business. It can impact so many different parts of society. And I think over the past year, getting more comfortable with how deep strategic communications can be in organizational behavior, how deep it can be in terms of societal understanding. I think over the past year, I've really tried to become more open to those areas. Today, you can't walk anywhere in our profession and not hear about social media, okay? But I do think there's a danger insofar as we have to understand that social media is an important new opportunity for us, but it's not the answer, in my opinion. Social media is part of the solution, but it's not the total answer. We always have to be asking ourselves as communicators, why are we doing this? Are we doing it so that more people go on Twitter? Are we doing it so more people go on Facebook? Are we doing it to help the business or the organization grow? Are we doing it to help define what our brand ID is? Are we doing it to help people understand what the value of our products are? We always have to keep coming back and kind of stepping back and saying, what is the actual reason for this? And then I think you can put things like social media into context. But I think sometimes we jump to the newest thing and we get caught up in that, and I think we lose sight of what the real goal is. Oh God. To me, communication is relationships. You know, at the end of the day, the more solid a relationship is, whether it's in business or in your personal life or your marriage or whatever, the better it is for you to get things done. Because once that happens, there's a level of trust that's formed.
Do you use Twitter?
I do. I have to do it more. I don't use it as much.
If you could tweet right now, what would you tweet?
Oh God, I would tweet that I'm in a beautiful location with a group of people that I've known, some of them, and have a high deal of respect for, and I'm kind of excited about what I'm going to learn. I think it's just new knowledge. I mean, anytime you come to events like this and sessions like this, you're looking to get new knowledge. You're looking to see how, look, a part of this is nobody has the answer. None of us have the answer. What we have are perspectives and points of view. So the more you can associate yourself with different perspectives and points of view, the smarter you are. So that's what I'm looking for.